This video is sponsored by Sunflex UK. If you own a home in the UK, you might be aware of something called permitted development. It's the right to make modest alterations or extensions to your home without needing planning permission. Small extensions to the rear, a porch to the front, or dormers on the roof. That kind of thing. This was introduced in 2015 because it solved a problem for the government. By creating permitted development rights, the government hoped to remove lots of small but time-consuming applications from the planning system. They could then reduce the number of planning officers employed by each local planning department. Permitted development exists because of austerity. It facilitated cuts to local authority budgets. I've been a self-employed architect in the UK since 2009, specialising in altering and extending private homes. You would think I might use permitted development regularly, but in all that time, this is the only project I built using the system. I'm going to talk about this project later in the video, but I should be clear up front, this is not a guide showing you how to design something to avoid the planning system. There are lots of rules around permitted development. Measurements from boundaries, areas of garden, volume of roof, height to the eaves, etc. I can't easily make a video about these rules because they vary between England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The system also allows local authorities to place restrictions on permitted development rights, so there are variations even at the local level. But the most important thing to understand is that permitted development rights can vary over time. I will come back to that later on. I'm not saying permitted development is wrong, but there are two big mistakes I see people making. And I want to talk to you about this so that you don't fall into the same trap. The first big mistake can limit your quality of life for no good reason. The second big mistake could lead to huge financial consequences and ruin your home, so stay tuned for that one. Okay, so the first big mistake people make with permitted development is to design their extension around the rules just to avoid going through the formal planning application process. Now, I get why people in the UK see the planning system as terribly risky. The media love a good horror story about the planners, but it really isn't sensible to limit the design of your home out of fear of this process. And yet, that is exactly what I see people doing. The reason this project is the only one I've built using permitted development is because I was able to persuade everyone else to go through the regular planning process to get a bigger extension. This project worked out exactly as the client wanted. The extension gave them all the extra space they needed, so permitted development worked for them. But I have lost count of the number of people I have met who started off the process desperate to avoid the planning system and willing to build a much smaller structure if that's what it took. It's a false economy. The planners aren't paying for your house extension and they aren't going to live in your house extension. It should be designed to suit your lifestyle, not their rules. If it means going through the regular planning process to make that happen, then go for it. I recently made a video showing the 4 biggest mistakes people make that guarantee their planning applications will be refused. The point being to show that the system will work most of the time, provided you understand a few simple rules in advance. I'll put a link at the end of this video. Hopefully it will help remove any fear you have about the planning system. Don't let permitted development rights talk you into getting less than you need. The second big mistake I see people make with permitted development is they assume that as long as they build their extension to the rules, it will be legit. Not so fast. There are 2 things which could ruin your home: politicians and the financial sector. The thing about rules is that politicians love to change them. I mean, what's the point of having power if you don't use it? All it takes is for lobby groups to persuade the government that permitted development has gone too far and should be rolled back. It's also possible for local authorities to restrict permitted development rights in your area. What was once acceptable might no longer qualify as permitted development if the council are lobbied by local residents. Now, why would this cause a problem if you built your extension to the rules as they were at the time? The answer is something called a certificate of lawfulness. This is essentially a letter from the planning department confirming that the design of your new extension or attic conversion does actually have permitted development rights. This could become a major issue if you try and sell your house. This is where the financial sector comes in. If a potential buyer has a mortgage, and many of them do, the mortgage lender won't release funds unless a chartered surveyor inspects your home and writes a report. Most of you will be familiar with this process, but one of the things the surveyor will look for is alterations to the existing house. When they spot the extension you built, they will ask whether you got planning permission. Didn't need it. It's permitted development. Okay, but do you have a certificate of lawfulness to prove that? At this stage, you might be thinking it's nothing more than a bureaucratic exercise. You fill in a form, pay a fee, and the local council will eventually give you the stamp of approval. The problem is, a certificate of lawfulness will only consider your building in relation to permitted development guidelines on the day you make the application. If those regulations have changed over time, they won't cut you any slack. Sending the council screenshots of Facebook posts when you built the extension back in 2017 won't help. They aren't going to be flexible on this. Side note, but the building regulations operate the same way if you make an application after construction is finished. So what next? If your extension doesn't actually have permitted development rights and you've alerted the local council, you will be asked to make a retrospective planning application. All bets are off. This will take months, and your property sale will be on hold until it's resolved. Now, the worst case scenario is that your retrospective planning application is refused, and you appeal the decision only for the appeal to also be refused. At that stage, you're looking at demolishing the structure. Nightmare. If you are considering using permitted development rights to build a modest extension to your home, I advise you carry out an application for certificate of lawfulness before any building work starts. Now don't worry, this isn't advertised to your neighbours and it doesn't get posted to the local planning portal. It's a private matter between you and the local council, and the fee is usually half that normally charged for a planning application. If the council reject the application, you can either revise the design to conform with the rules for permitted development, or go for a full planning application to get what you really want. I should point out that local authorities don't require certificates of lawfulness as standard. The whole point of permitted development is to limit the time planning officers spend assessing this kind of thing. Certificates of lawfulness have been around for a long time, but lawyers working for the big mortgage lenders started asking for them in recent years after homes altered using permitted development were put up for sale. This is from the NatWest website discussing permitted development and mortgages. They describe a certificate of lawfulness as something which protects homeowners when they sell their property. Homeowners are not legally obligated to have a certificate of lawfulness, but the system can still turn your life upside down if you don't have one. So make that application. Even if you use permitted development in the past, get the certificate of lawfulness now before the rules change. Regular viewers will know that I offer online consultations to UK homeowners via the Real Life Architect website. I should point out that because permitted development rules vary so much across the country, I won't be able to advise if you're thinking of using that system for your project. If you are thinking of something more challenging or you just want to discuss options, you can book a consultation with me. I've put a link in the description below, but please check the terms and conditions before you book a session. So how did this project comply with permitted development rights? This was built in 2018 in a suburb of Edinburgh, and the extension was more than 1 metre from the boundary, the roof was not more than 3 metres above the ground, and the extension took up less than 50% of the rear garden. Once the design was worked out, I applied for a certificate of lawfulness. You can see from the drawings that I originally proposed sliding patio doors, but the client later decided to change these to bifold doors. Now, regular viewers know that I have reservations about bifold doors. They need to be very high quality to ensure they last. And this might be a good time to discuss the sponsor of today's video. Sunflex UK design and manufacture high quality aluminium doors and windows. I made this video looking at how their products enhanced this project of mine. I've put a link to the video up here and in the description below. Sunflex also manufacture bifold doors, including new triple glazed models. These are super efficient and I will be making a feature video about them in the near future. My name is Neil and I am a real-life architect in the UK. I regularly make videos about the reality of altering and extending private homes, as well as issues affecting the construction industry and the architecture profession. If that appeals to you, subscribe to the channel to keep up to date.